I'm Aaron, welcome to Vintage Geek. Just a quick reminder, if you like vintage computers or discussing them, researching them, or perhaps visiting a museum about them, be sure to like and subscribe. It's going to help us a lot as we grow the channel and the Vintage Geek Museum. Speaking of which, we haven't had a trip to the Vintage Geek Museum here on the channel in a while, so I wanted to update everyone on the progress and what's going on. If you're familiar with the channel at all, you know that we're building a vintage computer museum here in Knoxville, Tennessee, to showcase a lot of the machines that we talk about on the channel regularly, and to give people an experience to have a hands-on opportunity to use some of these vintage machines. And we're really excited about this. It's a lot of work and a long project ahead of us. We've made some significant progress, and one of our first exhibits that we've been working on is the classroom exhibit. Computers were so instrumental to the classroom in the days that I was growing up, and it's really a lot of the reason that I have the sentimental feelings toward vintage machines. Being able to sit down and use some of those classic programs in the classroom was really a great way to learn and made it a lot more fun and interesting, and certainly made me interested in computers in general. So I'm hoping to share that feeling with the guests that come to the museum, give them a little bit of nostalgia for the old days, but also learn about how some of those systems worked, the evolution of computers over time in the classroom, and an opportunity to sit down and use some of these machines as well. So I'm here at the official welcome sign to our computer lab here at the Vintage Computer Museum. We're going to take a step inside and kind of see how this is coming along. When it comes to taking on a project like creating a vintage computer museum, it truly takes a team. We've been very lucky to assemble a really great team so far. One of our team members is Sally McCracken. Sally is our collections manager. She is also our exhibit designer. I know that when we first had the discussion, we talked about creating the kind of classroom environment that you might experience as a kid. Tell me a little bit about your process and kind of, putting the design together.
I approached this from two different perspectives, one being a design perspective and one being a content perspective. We really wanted to ensure that we captured a classroom that could be in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, at any point, that would be our vintage geek period. When we were thinking about the content that we wanted for this exhibit, we really wanted to ensure that there was a lot of human interest. We've all grown up in classrooms that had computers. So for that human interest, we took what does everyone love? We have discussion of great educational video games. We have a discussion of the controversies in computer education, the fear that the computer will replace the teacher.
I know that you ran across some interesting stories about Tennessee specifically, and how those computers kind of got rolled out.
The state of Tennessee would like to proudly say that they are second only to Minnesota in computer education. There was a great deal of discussion when computer education should take place, whether it should be in elementary school, middle school, high school. For the kids, picking up computers was pretty easy, but for educators and teachers, it was new, and it was really challenging for them to learn how to use these computers and to then transfer that knowledge to the kids. Luckily, Tennessee did end up undertaking a partnership with Apple, where they were able to get a deal on several Apple IIe's. So they were able to satisfy their goal of putting a computer in every middle school classroom, so one computer per every 30 students. I think that this exhibit can serve the community well as well. Some of our major goals with this exhibit were really to capture the nostalgia, but also to make it really relevant to today and to make it fun and interactive and useful. So this is going to be one of our more interactive exhibits.
Right.
We are going to have instructors, we are going to have opportunities for people to sort of learn and play with the computers in a way that we hope to spread across the entire museum, of course, but this is going to be a hub of interaction, specifically with educational games.
You know all of the inventory that we have in the museum, which is extensive. There were so many different computer manufacturers over the different years that really got involved in the classroom. Ultimately we kind of had to make a choice, and I did guide that decision a little bit, only because, I have an affinity for TRS-80 and the Radio Shack products, but we also have some really interesting things that have to do with early networking with those systems that we kind of wanted to showcase as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think these educational networks where there's sharing between a very finite amount, like a number of computers, it is the precursor to the internet.
Yes.
The internet, of course, as we all know, is really formative in terms of education, the ability to do research, the ability to do any of this stuff.
What was the first computer game that you played in a classroom?
I did play Oregon Trail in the 4th grade, just classic, but I think the very first computer game that I played in the classroom was probably Jumpstart third grade. Very exciting. You learn about fractions. Jumpstart games are great.
Yeah.
Highly recommend Jumpstart games.
Okay, fair enough.
Sponsor us.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to tell us a little bit about how this all came together. I think there's a lot to learn here, a lot to take in, and it's going to be a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
As I mentioned, it takes a great team to make these projects come together, so I want to introduce you to another member of our team, Justin Strong. He is our collections and technical assistant here at the Vintage Geek Museum. So when putting together everything for the exhibit, I know that we have a ton of software in the archive that you've been painstakingly going through and cataloging and organizing. Tell me about some of the notable ones that you might see discussed here in the classroom exhibit.
You know, of course, the canonical example is always Oregon Trail, which is just a beloved classic for multiple generations. A lot of Mech's games kind of covered not only history, but also just general geography and other topics like that. You know, of course, the first step to archiving a computer program is to actually back up the program itself.
Sure.
That is actually something we're able to do thanks to a piece of hardware called a CryoFlux, which is a floppy disk emulator. It allows us to connect older floppy disks, not only 3.5, but also 5.25, and even some of the older 8-inch floppy drives.
Oh, wow.
We are able to pull the code off of the disk and turn it into a disk image that we can then post for people to be able to access. We are actually hoping to have a BBS within the museum that is going to be accessible not only from the classroom area, that hopefully we can use to communicate between people visiting. People can leave messages and kind of check in similar to a guest book.
One of the interesting pieces that I feel like we have here is the System 80, which is right behind us here. This is going back to the 1960s, you know, talking about early technology. It actually allows you to put a record album in the top that had the instruction on it, and then there was a punch card and a film strip that goes into this slot right here on the front that would allow you to see the images that go along with the narration. And it's really interesting to see these early rudimentary forms of tech.
In a lot of ways, the programs that the System 80 was capable of running were very similar to an interactive film strip.
It's fitting that this is technically our first exhibit in the museum, because it just seems like where a lot of things came from, you know, that whole classroom feel. So.
Absolutely, and it's so many people, especially in my generation, who had their first experience with computers in the classroom. You know, booting up Rocky's Boots or something like that. Computer programs, specifically even the older microcomputer programs, combine so many different types of art. You know, early on you have visuals, you have writing, you have, you know, any kind of math or whatever it's trying to teach you, but then you also have programming, you have sound later on, and it becomes this entire experience as opposed to something that you would get off of, say, like a worksheet or something.
First computer game you ever played in the classroom?
First computer game I ever played in the classroom, probably Oregon Trail, but it was the earlier version of Oregon Trail, the late 70s version that has very limited games. So like, you know, of course the famous hunting game was entirely, you were situated in one place in the middle of the map and then could shoot in other directions. Okay, all right. So we ended up getting stuck with kind of the older ones, but
interesting.
It was a good time.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today and talk about the progress here. Very excited about the exhibit. I think it's just going to be a great thing for people to be able to come and see and interact with, and certainly experience those software titles that you've been painstakingly going through all this time. So we're really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Aaron.
We want to thank you for taking the time to join us for this little sneak peek, and we can't wait to eventually open the doors to allow people in. You can see everything we have here, and maybe you can even have a conversation with Randy the Tandy Robot, our official mascot here at the classroom exhibit. Again, want to remind you, if you like vintage computing, if you like what we're doing here, if you want to support the museum and the channel, please like and subscribe first and foremost. That's going to help us out a lot as we grow. Secondly, be sure to get some of this great merch, like the shirt I'm wearing today. You can check out the link in the description for all sorts of cool holiday gift ideas. We've got shirts, mugs, and a lot more, so be sure to check that out. Until next time, I'm Aaron, and this has been Vintage Geek.